Painting in monochrome or that beige or that grayish or that black and white, it isn't quite as big of a flex as you think it might be. And if you want to start selling more of your art in 2025, you're going to have to integrate more color. In this video series, I'm talking all about the basics of art and design and getting back to the fundamentals. So the first video was all on composition and why we need certain elements to do what they need to do to help guide our viewer to that end goal, that end message that we're trying to communicate. And in the other video, it was all about lighting and how that also plays a role in helping our viewer focus on something that we want to communicate. This video is all about color and how it brings that life and that joy into what we're trying to communicate. And if we haven't yet met, my name is Rachel, and I'm the manager and artist of Mercy Creates. I have a background in painting, drawing, graphic design, and marketing. So I like to create art and I like to sell my art. And I do that with Mercy Creates. It's all of my watercolor artwork and products that display the bold and beautiful truths of the Bible to help create those Christ-centered conversations in your home. And for some reason, I had the great idea to use my own personal work as an example for all of these videos. I'm sure you're not going to be surprised when I say this, but colors also bring emotions to a painting and to a piece. We often associate red and oranges with fire, with power, with resilience, and we associate greens and blues with peace, with growth, with breathing, relaxing. It's a big deal for designers and brand artists and companies and businesses to understand what their color means and color psychology and what emotions it invokes and creates and how they're going to use it with their products and their website. So it's also important for us as artists to understand if we're going to create a painting that depicts loneliness, we want to have colors that aren't going to be high energy. And on the flip side, if we're going to be painting or creating something for children, like a children's book, children's illustrations, teddy bears, and good nights, and rainbow fish, and all that good stuff, if we're going to be doing something for them and as our audience, we're not going to be having those muted tones. It's actually going to be really bright, really colorful, yellows and oranges and greens and blues. If we're trying to create something that depicts happiness and joy, or even if we want to do royalty, let's think about that. More often than not, royalty is associated with the deep purples and golds, crowns, the jewels, those jewel tones, autumn hues. If that's the mood that we're going for, we're not going to be picking hot pink. We're not going to be picking that Christmas red and green. We're going to be going for deeper shades of purples and golds. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to be using one of my collections to help demonstrate this concept. So the collection I chose for this one is called And He Answered, and I used 6 colors to create all 30 pieces, and I love it. I love how they're all working together. For this particular collection, I actually created a lookbook to give to my email subscribers so they can preview the collection, see which pieces that they liked, and I loved it. I loved making this lookbook. The collection was called And He Answered, all focusing around the theme of prayer, and it was released in 2023. So the first spread is the color story of what I wanted to communicate in this particular collection. I used light blues, some red, deep red wine, purples, golds, navies, and pinks, because I wanted to communicate the idea of peace, tranquility, also royalty, because God is sovereign and I believe that He's the king and authority. So the colors need to reflect that in some way. I'm also communicating like love and tenderness with the pinks, with the fuchsias. Some of them are a bit stronger than others. And what I mean, like the color stories are a little bit stronger than others in some pieces because there's different ideas that I'm trying to communicate and different emotions that I'm trying to communicate with those colors. So in this spread, I'm giving the paint names that I used, the hex color codes, the Pantone colors, and then also the paint colors from
Sherwin-Williams. So if you were interested in ever using it for web, print, or even for your home, you can find those colors pretty easily. So here's what it looks like on paper. Here's how all all six of those colors translated to paper. I didn't necessarily try to use every single one on each painting, but you can still see that it's pretty cohesive. This one right here, the blue, purple, and pink one. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord now and always. So that is trying to communicate a theme of hope, of God's sovereignty. So I'm using more of the royal tones, the blues and purples, and some of the pinks to represent that and communicate that. Here are some more of paintings for using that particular color story. The top one on the very, very first one says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." This yellow, deep blue, navy, little bits of like that light sky blue and purples. I wanted that one to be more heavenly. And I think when I think of heaven, I think of sunshine, lights, again, that navy, that royalty. Here's one. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So you can see this one even has, I believe, all six of the paints, six of the colors that I use: the navy, the light blue, the yellow, the purple, and the pink within it. It's leaning more towards the blues and the cooler tones of it because I wanted that to be more introspective, more reflective, more thinking about the Lord and how we can honor Him. Little bits of energy with the hot pink, with the light pinks, with the purples, but more focusing on God and His authority. Here are more pieces and their uh, respective verses. I also did a lot of pieces on canvas using the same six colors again. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. So this one again is more of those navies, the blues, the purples, little bits of the warm tones and the hot pinks to convey that energy, but I really want it to be more introspective, reflective, more alone time and thinking about how we can honor the Lord. I didn't have a ton of verses. I can't remember how many verses I specifically put within this collection, but I restricted my color palette to those six colors. So I think it's interesting. You'll see this verse, I think, one other time in a sticker format. It's Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. We already saw that earlier in the lookbook, and here's another iteration of it using the same six colors, so it still looks cohesive, but it also looks like an entirely different piece. And I think that's a fun thing about if you create your own color palette, you have an idea in mind of how you're going to use those particular colors, but you are ultimately in control of the percentages of how much of one color you use, the navies or the purples or the yellows or the pinks. And even though you're using different percentages and different values of each one, it's still going to look cohesive from the first painting to the second painting to the third to the fourth to the fifth. Here are two more paintings that I did on panels. We thank you, God, and praise your glorious name. And I give thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. And again, these are more of the heavenly, celestial, looking towards the sky, looking towards the Lord, reflective, calm, peaceful types of paintings that I wanted to communicate with the color story. These are also paintings on canvas. And these are relying more within the cooler tones, the navies and purples and pinks. I wanted those to be more present, not quite the pops of pink, hot pink, and yellows. I wanted them to be there, but not quite as prominent as some of the other pieces. I also painted some Bibles, Bibles and notebooks within this collection. Again, here's Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So this Bible, the color story, this one is a little bit more energetic, more in your face, more bold, more, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm committing to do. Yes, God, you are important to me, and I'm going to make you important to me. So I wanted that to be more evident with not just the colors, but also the brush strokes. You can see how there's splatters, there's lines, the edges are much rougher. I want this to be a commitment. Another Bible, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. And this is more on the cooler side, or not. And this is more on the warmer side of the color palette with the reds, pinks, and yellows. But you can see that the blues kind of ground it. That navy really keeps it settled and provides that contrast. Notebooks that I painted also for this collection. Again, these are a little bit more bold, more striking with the colors. And the brushstrokes, I really want it to be more intentional. The paintings, when you're looking at them at the wall, they're meant to be more reflective. The utility art, what I consider to be the Bibles and notebooks, they're more commitment oriented, action oriented. Let's go. This is what I said I was going to do, so I'm going to do it. Here are the fronts and backs of those notebooks. These are all action verses. And that's, again, what I wanted to communicate with the color story and with the brushstrokes. Now, there's a few more items within this collection and the lookbook, but they are all inspired by the other pieces that I just showed you. So I'm not going to go too in depth with it, but if you wanted to take a look at the collection or at the lookbook, I'll have all of the links below in the description.
Color is one of the most impactful elements in art, and the best way to understand it is by using the color wheel. There is a science to understanding and learning which colors are harmonious with others, and that's why we have the color wheel to help us get to that point of, I picked a color, now what? When you get into color schemes, there are three main frameworks that we're going to talk about, and these are the three main frameworks that people use all the time: complementary, analogous, and tertiary. Now you might be thinking, well, all this sounds great. Color makes emotions, color creates beauty. You love color. Cool. How does this affect me? How do I make a harmonious color palette? Well, here are 3 steps. I promise this will help you in every painting. Number 1, you're going to start with your base color. You want to know and understand the mood that you want your painting to create. And then you're going to pick the color associated with it and just go overarching. Don't get too nitty gritty down in the details. That's 3 or 4 steps later. We want to just pick a color and go. We can modify later. So we have our base color. Now you want to remember and think through those different color schemes of complementary, analogous, or tertiary. And you're going to then go from that base color and pick to the next one. Again, don't worry about how much of one color you're going to use, or if it needs to be brighter, if it needs to be darker. What if we scale it a little bit more to the greens and yellows? Just pick the color and then move on to the next step. Once you have your base down, then you can start getting into the details. So once you have your main color picked out, then you have your second and third color picked out, add those neutrals. Neutrals can be anything in that white, gray, black, or even that brown, taupe, and grayish scheme. Now I want you to think of it as a triangle. So you have your main color, then you have your 2 extra colors, and then you have 3 colors that are your neutrals. These neutrals are going to help balance out your color palette. You're going to have your primary color, your secondary colors, and then your third colors, which are going to be the balancing ones. If you want to really get more into a formula, think of it as 50, 20, and then 10s. The more that you create color palettes and the more that you exercise your brain into thinking how to create color palettes and stretch your creativity that way, the more you're going to be with it. You're going to be dialed into which colors you need to create for which aesthetic, which mood, which type of brand, which type of subject matter. It's going to be I can do this, no problem. And if you did do that exercise and you created something with it, share it with me. Email me, message me, put a link in the comments below. I want to see what you're creating and what you're painting. I bet it looks really good, and I want to see you stretch your creativity and those muscles, because the more you stretch them, the more it's going to be easier for you to keep doing, to keep practicing, the more confident you're going to become, and the more people are going to love it and enjoy it. And I especially want to cheer you on what you're creating. So please share it with me. And if you want to learn more about color, there's a module dedicated to it specifically in watercolor foundations. Watercolor Foundations is a 6-module course that I created. It's like a big FAQ of painting that draws on my knowledge and experience of being a painter and an artist for over 10 years. We talk through all of the big things like, why is my paper bending? How can I get it to not bend? Which brush do I use for florals and for lettering? How do I not make everything look so muddy and so gross? What do I need to do? How much water do I need to be using with my paints? And of course, we talk about color and color theory and color palettes. And there's even 10 color palettes that I created that I'm giving to you in that module. So you can start painting and not feel intimidated by, oh, I still don't understand the color wheel. How do I figure this out? You can just go. You can just start doing it. So if you want to learn more about color theory, color palettes, and painting, you can join Watercolor Foundations through the link below. So far we've covered a lot of groundwork for our painting and for our craft. We've talked about composition, we've talked about lighting, and now we've talked about color. And I'm excited about the next one that we're going to talk about, which is storytelling. Because, like we said, it's all a journey to get our viewer to understand something that we're talking about. So we need to think through and identify, what is it that we're trying to talk to them about? Because if we don't have a message and we're just blah, 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 then what are we actually doing? We want our viewer to understand what it is that we're doing. We want them to connect with it, and we want them to buy it. So when we have that story or we have that message nailed down of why we created what we created, it's going to be so much easier to paint or to draw or to photograph or to weave, to do whatever it is that you want to do. When we understand why, the next step is going to be so much easier. Thanks for joining me, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.